Do you really see yourself through your own eyes, or are you judging yourself based on what you think others think of you? Majority of people, very likely you as well, believe that you're seeing yourself through how you think of yourself, what your opinion is of yourself, but you don't realize that the moment you start judging yourself, you're judging yourself based on what you think others think of you. So, without meaning to, we end up seeing ourselves through the eyes of others. And when we see ourselves through the eyes of others, we start doing a whole lot of things that complicates life significantly, increases our stress levels phenomenally. And the other thing it also does is it creates a strain and an unrealistic expectation of responsibility of our partners or the people that we have around us. And that's because when you see yourself through other people's eyes, you're constantly focused on why it is that your efforts, because it's so dedicated towards doing things that they want to appreciate or need or love or enjoy, you're constantly going to be looking for whether or not they're receiving it in that way. And if they don't, then you assume that you're unappreciated. And that's how it complicates things. It complicates things in so many ways, in so many different forms, in so many roles that we play, that if anything, this is probably one of the most debilitating internal conversations you can ever have with yourself. How to spot it, and I'll come back to the impact on relationships and things. But how do we spot whether we're seeing ourselves through our own eyes or we're seeing ourselves through the eyes of others? The moment you find yourself judging yourself, whether it's about something important, about something mundane, or if it's even something that you believe is important to you, the moment you find yourself judging about whether you're good enough or not, right or wrong, whatever it is, then that's a point of you viewing yourself from someone else's perspective. And that someone else could be a religious authority, it could be your partner, it could be your parents, it could be society, it could be your social setting, your social group, your professional group, whatever it is. The point is that you're looking at yourself and you're considering whether that attribute or that behavior of yours would be deemed acceptable, unacceptable, or appreciated or not from that source, from those people. This is not something you can avoid because we're social beings by nature. So we need to have healthy relationships for us to feel as if we matter. And if we don't have healthy relationships, then that's usually where we lose ourselves to the struggles of life, because we automatically assume that who we are doesn't matter. So what we do then becomes the focus of everything we do. So back to the judgment thing. Judgment is always a point of comparison external to who we are. So it's like I might go on social media and I might come across some ridiculous guru or influencer telling me how it is that narcissistic behavior looks. So now I pick up on one or two or three of those attributes and I say, okay, hold on. If I'm doing that, then does that make me a narcissist? And this is something that a lot of people grapple with. Because everyone is so afraid of being labeled these days. I think we've got more bullies in the mental health space these days than we have sincere advisors, because the moment someone wants to label you or label someone you're with, they're a bully. I'll come back to that as well. So when we look at judgment is about comparison. It's about whether or not you meet a certain standard, meet a certain grade or an expectation. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in itself, as long as you realize why you are comparing yourself in that way. So when you compare yourself in that way, without realizing that you're comparing yourself and you think you're just self-assessing, reflecting, or holding yourself accountable, that's when you start running into problems. There has to be purpose behind the judgment. Because if there isn't purpose behind the judgment, then the judgment just becomes a matter of stress, because you need to be enough. You need to meet the standard. You need to meet the expectation or whatever it is, so that you can be accepted, so that you can be included, so that you are going to have healthy social bonds, or people are going to like you, or your partner is not going to reject you. All of those sorts of things start playing out. So the point of judgment has always got to be something that talks towards an aspirational goal of yours. And that's where the difference between judging ourselves and self-evaluation towards growth, that's where the difference comes in. If I don't realize the difference between the two, I'll constantly be beating myself up and pushing myself harder and harder and harder because I think that's growth. But growth should be fulfilling. Growth should be something that gives us a sense of accomplishment, gives us some peace, gives us an understanding of ourselves and an understanding of people around us. Growth is not in a book. Growth is not in a reel. It's not in some podcast even. It has to be what you take from that and adopt as your own, and then that becomes your aspirational goal, your vision for yourself. And most people don't do that. They don't adopt something for themselves. They look at something within the context of that seems to be acceptable or seems to be popular or seems to be what other healthy people or relationships look like. So I need to do that. And can you see how the need versus the want changes your energy and your attitude towards it? And that's where stress comes in. Because when you need to do something, that means that if you don't do it, there is a consequence, a negative consequence that's going to result from you not doing it. And that could either be a negative consequence for yourself because you're not going to get something you want, or you're not going to appear the way you want people to perceive you and all of that sort of thing. And that's why the judgment point is such a difficult issue, because if you don't realize you're judging yourself, or if you believe that judgment is needed or necessary, and you don't understand why, or you don't have a real conviction, a mindful conviction in why the judgment is necessary, or even that standard is necessary that you're holding yourself to. If you don't have a healthy relationship with that, automatically what's going to happen is everything becomes stressful. And that's what happens when you accomplish something or you achieve that expectation, and then you already feel on edge about, okay, what's next? Are they going to find some other fault? Is it something else that I need to be aware of? How do I need to push myself to the next level? And then you're always chasing. Now, if you're chasing because of that inclusion, because of that respect or admiration you're looking for, or because you want to be at the top of your game, etc., you're still comparing yourself to others. What's the point of it? If you're comparing yourself to anyone else, what is the purpose behind that comparison? What problem does it solve for you in your personal endeavors to create a life that's worth living or a legacy that's worth leaving? How does that comparison feed that? How does it enable that in a healthy way? So if you start realizing that you're judging yourself a lot, that it's always about, I got this wrong. If you got it wrong, relative to what? Who told you what right is supposed to look like? How did you come to the conclusion of this is the correct way, or this is the preferred way, or this is the healthier or better way? Because if you don't understand where that opinion of yours comes from, where that view of yours comes from about what should be a better way to do things, then you're going to be chasing validation and you're going to be chasing approval. But when you get into a relationship is supposed to be safe. So you shouldn't be chasing approval and validation anymore. And that's why you get a lot of people who don't accept themselves because they're still judging themselves. They're trying their hardest to be decent people. So it's not that there's ill intent behind it. And this is the problem with not having this awareness about what's driving your actions and your motivations to do things. They don't realize that they have that. And then when they get into a relationship that's supposed to be safe, then they look for acceptance. And then if their partner points out something that they might need to be might need to improve on or grow in or consider doing differently or stop doing, it feels like rejection. It feels like judgment. It feels like a whole lot of things that's unpleasant, because your idea of being in that relationship and feeling safe is anchored to how it is that they accept and create space for you. That is how it complicates relationships massively, because when you look at the kind of contention, the kind of problems that develop in a relationship, in marriage, in parent-child relationships, all of these things, when you look at how that develops, you'll realize that it's always because there's an expectation that's not being met. And the expectation, if we don't know what informs that expectation, then again, we run into problems. So knowing what sets the expectation, whether the expectation is something that is even realistic or relevant for your specific scenario with your partner or whoever it is that you're having problems with. Understanding that is more important than whether or not they meet the expectation. And that's where the mindfulness and self-awareness comes in. So the labeling bullies, and I call them bullies because people look for significance by being able to compartmentalize and be clever about others. So then they come across as authoritative and informed and really wise about how relationships work and how people work. And then you get people talking about childhood trauma and mother wounds and father wounds and all of these kinds of nonsense that is supposed to shape the human in front of you. We all have defining experiences in our life. Every single one of us. That's how life works. What defines you about the experiences you had is what you took from it, what you believed to be true about it. And I've touched on this before, but it's worth repeating, and I'll probably touch on it many times in the future. If we don't understand what we took from those relationships, that becomes our sense of self. That becomes our self-awareness. And that is what then inclines us towards trying to be good enough, trying to get things right, trying to prove them wrong, trying to do better than what they did for us, all of that sort of thing. And it still becomes a comparison. So when you see parents who set out, or people who set out into marriage and they think, okay, we're going to have children and we're going to be better parents than our parents were to us and all of that, you find that they make all the same mistakes just in a very creatively different way. And that's because they're comparing, they're judging, they're not understanding. They don't understand what it was that caused either their parents not to show up for them the way they needed to, or why it is that they misinterpreted the intent behind what their parents were trying to achieve with them. And because of that, they automatically assume that their view on how they felt, and this is the other, this is a really big gripe, is that people honor their emotions to such an extent that they abandon critical thinking and they abandon rationalization or reasonable thought in favor of how they feel. Just because you feel the way a certain way about something doesn't mean that you're right. Doesn't mean that it has to be honored by everyone else around you. Your emotions are yours to regulate. The person around you can create understanding or create a space for you to be able to work through your emotions, but it's still your emotions to work through. And they're not obliged to create that space for you because it all depends entirely on how it is that you conduct yourself when you're in that emotional state. And a lot of the time when we go through these things where we start applying labels and things like that, and we get into this victim headspace, we automatically assume that because we feel a certain way justifies us not having patience or not having tolerance or not being kind to people around us. You must understand, I'm very stressed, so that's why I did that, or this is why I did this, or this is why I don't have time for that, or this is why I'm triggered and all of that sort of thing. You know my triggers, so why don't you be more sensitive? The moment you start taking your emotions and you make someone else accountable for it, or you make them accountable for how it is that they must respond to it, you're in a victim headspace and you're judging yourself. You're judging yourself because you are looking at what it is that you are feeling or what it is that you are experiencing or thinking, and how it is that according to some frame of reference somewhere that you picked up from one of those defining experiences or one of these label bullies on the internet, you take that and you think, well, because I'm feeling this, he is or she is supposed to respond to me in a certain way or create space for me or be supportive in a certain way. So when you end up judging yourself all the time, without meaning to, you end up making your life about you, not about the people around you. And that's one of the biggest failings of mainstream mental health, is this focus on individualism and selfish gain, about what it is that you must take, what it is that you must claim, what it is that you must not allow others to do to you, etc., etc. We've lost the plot on that. That's why we've got such unhealthy relationships. That's why we've got such a fractured society. And that's why we don't have healthy role models, which then cause image dysmorphia, if you want to call it that. Our self-image becomes distorted because we don't have healthy role models and healthy frames of reference against which to figure out how life works and why we feel the way we do, or why we need what we need, or why it is that we express ourselves the way we do, why we find difficulty in expressing ourselves or processing certain experiences. It's because of the absence of a healthy village, of a healthy support structure. So, coming back to the point of this discussion today, the importance of understanding whose eyes you see yourself through whose eyes you see yourself. The importance of understanding that is so that you can seek to understand why it is that that frame of reference or that perspective is important. Why is that standard important for you to uphold? What is the benefit in it? What is the value in it? Why is it that if you struggle to achieve it, why is it that you find yourself beating yourself up about it instead of trying again and seeing, trying to understand what it is that you're not getting about it? Because that's the difference between an aspirational goal and a point of judgment, a standard that you're subscribing to, a religious guide or law that you have to implement, or else you're going to burn in hellfire and all of that. Kindness doesn't come from fear. Generosity doesn't come from fear either. When you start giving, or when you start treating people kindly because you want to be seen a certain way, that's a transaction. And that transaction has a very real entitlement and a very real expectation behind it. And that's a subconscious expectation that is usually set. People that are willfully transactional, they're in it because there's some personal gain, and that's what they're consciously doing. And if you don't know how to spot them, you're going to be one of their targets, because that's their way of feeling significant. And that's their demons to sort out, because it's not a fulfilling way of life either. It keeps you going from one adrenaline rush to the next adrenaline rush, but it doesn't actually fulfill you or make you feel as if you're significant in the way that would ground you in this world. So when we don't have a healthy understanding of all of this about ourselves, a healthy self-image, a healthy self-worth, we automatically become driven by what we want to communicate to others and how we want them to receive it. And that's part of the problem. We want them to receive it the way we want them to receive it. We don't want to see how they're receiving it and then understand why it is that what we're communicating is not being received the way we had hoped or intended. So when you, and I'm not talking against religion or against any philosophy or any cultural norms or anything of that sort. The point is that if I come from a certain cultural background or a certain religious background, and I see in there's a code of life that it demands of me that I need to subscribe to. Now I can either look at that as, if I don't comply, there's going to be negative consequences, fire and brimstone and hellfire and all of that, or there's going to be exclusion or isolation or ridicule or mockery in my social circles. And that's usually the kind of things that drive our behavior, is the avoidance of those things, the avoidance of consequence, the avoidance of punishment. So if I don't recognize that that's what's driving me, that will eventually make me rigid and harsh. And the only time I'm going to come across kind and sensitive and accommodating is to people who I believe are also doing their best to comply with that code of life. Which means that the moment I come across someone who disagrees with that, or who doesn't quite resonate or connect with it yet, and they behave in a way that's untoward or unacceptable within that code of life or code of conduct, I'll be very harsh and very judgmental towards them. And that's where you can see the difference between someone that is grounded in their humanness versus someone who is confident and emboldened because they appear to be so competent and so proficient and so accomplished relative to the societal standard or religious standard that they are holding. And that usually results in very little internal peace. So if you want internal peace, if you want to feel peaceful, if you want to feel content about your efforts in life without chasing all the time, while simultaneously achieving important milestones or important goals for yourself, you have to be driven by aspiration, not by judgment, not by fear. You have to look at something and connect with, what is the value of that? Why do I believe that attribute or that trait or that accomplishment is important? And then based on how you understand and connect with that value, you will then hold yourself to your convictions about that value that you see, and that will automatically drive you towards wanting to improve yourself and raise your game and improve your skills and improve your understanding and everything else, so that you invest consistently, both materially, emotionally, and intellectually, towards achieving that outcome, because you understand or you believe in the value it's going to create, not just for you, but for the people around you. That's part of your legacy that you leave. And that's how you get around seeing yourself through someone else's eyes. You look at whatever it is that you're judging yourself about, and you mindfully reflect on that, and you consider what is the reason for that judgment. And if you believe that what you're judging yourself about is valid, like maybe you're not as patient as you would like to be with your children, or maybe you're not as emotionally available as you would like to be for your partner, then you take that and you turn it into an aspirational goal. Internalize it. Not intellectualize it, internalize it. When you internalize it, what you do is then you look at it and you think, I don't like myself being this impatient, irritable person towards my partner or towards my children. And based on that, you try to understand, why is it that you get your back up so quickly, or you have such a short fuse, or you're so intolerant towards them pushing you for something that you think is unreasonable, or being petty about something, or whatever it is. You try to understand why you feel that way about it. And the more you understand why, the more you'll realize that your reactiveness to what it is that drives you to appear or to behave in an impatient or intolerable or irritable way, that is what you need to solve. That is what you need to grow to understand. And it's usually not because of what's happening in front of you. Because life is about themes. It's about emotional themes. And that's why I don't believe in this childhood wound, this and mother wound and father wound and all of that nonsense. Because it's not about that wound or that past experience that you are still upset. It's about the fact that how it felt, your current experience, your current relationship, your current scenario, your current stress is making you feel the same way as you did before. And it's that association of how I feel now compared to how I felt when someone treated me a certain way. That's what causes us to have what we like to call triggers and sensitivities. And that's what causes us to hold our partners accountable for being unkind towards us, because they know we don't like this or we don't like that. When you have aspirational goals about these things, and you realize that being this irritable is destroying your own peace, and it's destroying someone else's peace, because they have a significant role to play in your life and you have a significant role to play in their life. When you understand that, it's about who you want to be relative to that inclination, that natural disposition of yours. And that's how you grow. You grow because you look at yourself and you think, I don't like that aspect about myself. And not because there's a label attached to it, because you're narcissistic or you're bipolar or you're something or the other. And people are going to tell me that these are mental illnesses and everything else. Please do the research. The whole mental illness and mental disorder theories have been debunked so many times. It's actually ridiculous that we're still using it in mainstream discussions. But that's a discussion for another day. The point is, if you're going to look at yourself through the lens of labels and labels that other people come up with, the latest one I came across is avoidant. What nonsense. If you apply a label to yourself, just take this as a golden rule, right? And I'm digressing slightly, but it's all interconnected. If you are going to apply a label to yourself, like say narcissism, if you apply it to someone else, right? Because it's more easier for us. It's a whole lot more convenient for us to apply labels to others, right? Because it makes it easier for us to be able to gauge how much we want to invest in that relationship, or what we want to invest in the first place. So let's assume we call someone else a narcissist. Then you must prove to yourself, if you're going to be honest about it and you're going to be sincere and have conviction about how it is that you believe you're authentic in how you view them and how you're going to treat them, because it must be a reflection of your value system, right? Then if you call someone a narcissist, then you have to prove that they are a narcissist in every setting, not only in the setting with you. Because if they are only narcissistic in their relationship with you, then you need to consider what is it about what you need from them, not whether you're right or wrong to need it. what you need from them, why is that something that is like a provocation for them, that is provoking their insecurities, that causes them to behave in a way that is very selfish, that comes across as manipulative, which is another thing. When we label people as manipulative, we must understand the person is not manipulative by intent. Manipulation is a tool towards an end. And the only reason we adopt manipulation as the tool is because we have very little reason to believe that if we try to achieve it in other ways because of who we are and whether we'll be enough for someone to want to do it for us, etc. If we believe that that's not going to be enough, that we'll be unsuccessful if we try to do it that way because we don't think people are going to be that inclined towards what's important to us, then manipulation becomes the tool by which we secure what we need because we need it. We believe we want to feel a certain way, or we want to have a certain thing, or whatever it is. And that's why the labels are so problematic, because it's tiring just talking about it, because labels distract you from the human. Labels distract you from the person who is going through their own struggles, similar to how you've got your own struggles. But just because you regulate yourself a bit better than them doesn't make you better than them, because it's all relative. You know, the one thing that always sticks with me when it comes to talking about it's all relative is something that I heard once. It says that the reason a baby cries at the time of birth is because relative to their lifespan, which is a couple of hours at that point, relative to that lifespan of theirs, that's been the most traumatic experience they have ever had. And that's how life works, is that relative to our experiences, we become more familiar, more comfortable, more informed, more wise or wiser. And that's how we develop and grow. But if you're going to be judging yourself, you're not going to develop and grow. You're just going to become more competent, more deliberate, more skilled, more talented, but you're not going to become more human. Your humanity, your humanness is going to be underdeveloped. And then you're going to rely on coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms to protect yourself from what feels like threats and vulnerabilities. Dump the labels. If we want to break the stigma on mental health, we need to stop calling it mental illness, because it's the legitimate human experience behind that illness that we now identify as something wrong with someone's whatever, headspace, brain, mind, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. There's a human that's struggling there. And if you don't see that human in them, then chances are you don't see the human in yourself. And if you don't see the human in yourself, you're going to be driven by all of the external factors that you're trying to be enough of, enough for, that you're trying to meet, that you're trying to be validated with, or whatever it is. And that's why you end up living loud and wanting everyone to see your success, or wanting to see your struggle, or wanting to see your accomplishments and celebrate it with you. Not because they're important to you, but because you want to feel celebrated. And that's a very empty way to live. And the more we try to find contentment and comfort and assurance and wholesomeness in that way of life, the more we're going to be convinced that people are bad. It's not that people are bad. It's that everyone is so internally focused and judging themselves and beating themselves up because of this ridiculous idealism and distorted mental health perspectives that we have these days, that people don't even know how to relate to themselves as humans anymore. They don't see the human beside them, the human in the child, the human in their partner, the human in people that they encounter in their professional space or in their social spaces. That's what makes us so harsh and intolerant as a society. That's what causes the polarization, the sectarianism. That's what causes the classism and causes the elitism and causes all of these isms. And I've always maintained that the moment you add ism to anything, you've taken it too far. Regardless of whether it's religion, whether it's something else, if there's an ism attached to it, you've lost your balance, you've lost your moderation, you've lost your middle ground that is going to be healthy in how you experience it, how you contribute towards it, and how others receive it. So I hope that's some food for thought that will give you reason to want to question the labels you've adopted for yourself, because that's where it starts. when you start realizing what labels you've adopted for yourself, how you painted this lens that you see yourself through now, what informed that perspective, when you start becoming more aware of that, that's when you can consciously and mindfully and deliberately and purposefully, you can then work through that and you can decide if it's actually valid. Because that's the other thing, is that if we had a bad experience at some point in our life, and what we took from that when we emerged from that experience was how we were never going to allow someone to treat us that way again. What that does is it creates one of those external points of reference. Because if we don't want someone to treat us that way again, we're going to go into our next relationship with someone who is not treating us that way, but because we feel that way of something else entirely unrelated that they're doing, we automatically get our defenses up because, I've seen this before. I know what I'm looking for. I know all the signs, all the signals. I know when you're gaslighting me, and I know when you are hoodwinking me and catfishing me. And how did we get to this point? How did we get to this point of ridiculousness where everything has a label now? Where you can't just have a conversation with someone and agree that you just have different perspectives and you need to put more effort into understanding and explaining so that you can have a meeting of the minds. That's something that we don't have anymore. Maybe I'm old school, but a meeting of the minds is where two people put in a genuine concerted effort to understand each other, not to prevail, not to label each other, not to try and define someone as being defective in some way and that's why they need to get themselves sorted out. Go fix yourself and then come back and then maybe we can have a good relationship. Go for therapy. We're not broken. Just because you feel broken doesn't mean you're broken. It just means that your spirit has been shaken. Your inclination towards wanting to push through and endeavor to greater things in life, that's been hampered because of something that shook you, it jarred you. And when you start understanding that, you'll stop being defined by the labels that people throw at you. You're a human who has your struggles, and every other person around you is human with their own struggles. And if you start seeing the human in yourself, it will make it easier for you to create space for the humans around you. But if you don't see the human in yourself, you're constantly going to need people to recognize what it is that's so amazing about who you are and how you got to this point and how they shouldn't judge you. Because the moment you're telling people don't judge me, it means you're already judging yourself. And that's the other critical point about this. You will not feel judged if you're not already judging yourself. If someone comes to me and tells me that I'm an idiot, I'm going to look at them and say, okay, thanks, cool, no problem, and I'm going to move on. Because I don't believe I'm an idiot. But if I believe that I'm probably idiotic or ignorant or stupid or lacking intelligence in some way or another, and someone comes to me and tells me that you're an idiot, I'm going to fight with them. Because how dare they expose my shame that I'm holding on the inside? How dare they draw attention to that? Because I'm not stupid. How can you call me stupid? You don't know what I've been through. You don't know why it is that I behave this way. Or you don't know why it is that I'm struggling with this. You need to be more kind and more compassionate. And if you're judging yourself, you will be hypersensitive to other people judging you. So what you judge yourself with is what it is that will increase your sensitivity about what it is that others might have to say about you or give you feedback about that you don't want to hear because you're already beating yourself up about it. And that is again a problem because of labels. Because you're so busy judging yourself about the labels and expectations and standards and perceptions that other people have of you and all of that, that you don't stop to consider, well, why is it that I still feel this way so long after the experience? Answer that question meaningfully. And suddenly that experience becomes a point of growth, a point of wisdom. It's no longer something that defines who you are. Because that's what experiences are supposed to do. It's supposed to inform our wisdom about how life works. It's not supposed to define us because we had that experience. So this victim mindset, the survivalist mentality, the coping mindset, it's destructive. It's so limiting, so constraining that eventually it feels like you can't breathe because you're so tired of trying. I always tell people, you either do or you don't. You can't try. If you know how to do something, if you know how to raise your hand, and I ask you to try to raise your hand, what are you going to do? You can't raise it because I didn't ask you to raise it. And you can't leave it because I asked you to try to raise it. So how do you try to do something that you already know how to do? This is a simple logic that escapes us when we approach things from this judgmental label perspective. So the next time someone throws a label at you, just smile and try to understand where they're coming from rather than accepting that that label has merit. Try to understand why it is that they might choose to express themselves in that way, or why it is that they connect with things that way, if, of course, it's an important relationship to you. Because if you can do that with every person that throws judgment or a label at you, you're going to exhaust yourself trying to get through to every single person and convince them that you're not the way they see you. Because it's another thing that happens when we drive ourselves by labels and external standards. We try to convince every person that we're not that. We're not some negative opinion they have of us, etc. Are you tired hearing about this? Because I'm tired talking about it. Because that's what labels and that's what judgment does to us. It wears you down. It doesn't build you up. What builds you up is that moment of inspiration, that aha moment, that now I understand why. That's what builds you up, and that's what emboldens you to want to go on and do something greater next time, because now you know. You only were aware of a few things that you thought you needed to take care of to achieve something, and when you tried it out, something else went wrong and you just didn't see that coming. Now you can beat yourself up about the fact that you didn't see it coming when you don't know what you don't know. Or you can recognize that, hold on, maybe I should have relied on a different source of information to inform my perspective of what it is that I needed to do to accomplish this thing. So that you adjust that. You adjust who you're taking advice and guidance and information from, or you go and look through more authoritative sources, or you start understanding what are the contributing factors to what it is that you want to do, not just what you need to do with it and all of that. And that's how you learn how to navigate life more effectively and more fulfilling. So stop judging yourself. Stop judging others. But you can't give what you don't have. So as long as you're judgmental towards others, as long as you're rigid and inflexible and insensitive and triggered and blaming others for how you feel, it means that you've got a lot of work to do on yourself. And that's what you need to own. Stop making the people around you responsible for how you feel about yourself. I'm Zaid Ismail. I rarely mention my name in these, but maybe I should do it more often. I'm Zaid Ismail, and I'm hoping that this gives you reason to reconsider what you think of yourself, so that you might alleviate the pressure you put on others to make you feel better about who you are. Take care.